The following podcast is part of the MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network.
Hi, I'm Lindsay, host of the Live Like Eden podcast. What do you do when your whole life flips upside down? Are you questioning everything, lost in chaos, or yearning for life's deeper meaning? I've been there, deep in the thick of it, unraveling my own awakening mess for over 20 years. Now I'm here to help you through yours. I share no-nonsense weekly wake-ups, cutting through the ego's illusions to wake you up to your own spiritual wisdom. No mountaintop bliss needed here, just practical tools, insights, and real-life experience to save you time. Plus, a much-needed laugh when we're all losing it. Let's dive into this fresh new episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. I'm Lindsay, your host of the Live Like Eden podcast. I just got back from a week-long vacation last night. I mentioned a couple of episodes ago that I was going on a cruise with my mom, on a plant-based cruise, a holistic cruise at sea. We went down to Mexico, to Cozumel, Costa Maya, and Honduras, and had several days at sea, and got plenty of good food and sunshine, which is one of my favorite things to do. And we listened to a ton of different speakers, doctors, and lectures throughout the week, all based on a plant-based diet. I want to just put a disclaimer up front. I am not a dietitian, a nutritionist, a health coach, a doc, nothing like that. But I have eaten a plant-based diet for over 20 years. I raised my children that way. And I've experimented with different types of food in the plant-based world, and I just feel better on plants. I don't promote a certain diet. I'm not here telling you must eat this way. My whole family eats meat, so except for my son. And I don't really care too much about what other people eat. I just do what makes me feel good in my own body. And I really encourage you to do the same thing. Eat what works for you. But I do want to share what I learned this week, and some of it was just kind of reiterating things I've already known. But, every now and then when you've been doing something for so long, it's nice to get sort of re-energized or a little bit more inspiration to include different foods in your diet or just get excited about it again. And for any of you out there that are listening right now that are struggling with your health and you are suffering from chronic illness and disease, you've tried everything, you get nothing in the medical world. You're just getting nothing. Starting with your diet is a great thing to do. And it's something that empowers you to heal because you can do it all on your own. And you can consult with your doctor about it too. In fact, here are some of the doctors, medical doctors that I listened to this week, people I've listened to for many, many years. But Dr. Neal Barnard was there, Dr. Michael Greger, Dr. Scott Stoll, and Brenda Davis, a very well-known dietitian nutritionist for over decades. I want to say at least 3 to 4 decades, she's been discussing the plant-based diet. And back in the day when they basically said in the 70s that you were going to kill yourself if you ate a plant-based diet. So she's weathered many storms, and I listened to many of her talks throughout the week. What I want to focus on for you today is just tips for a healthy diet and a vibrant you. Simple things. And as you know, if you listen to this show regularly, I like simplicity. I'm not somebody who's going to measure out my nutritional supplements or all the nutritional elements that I need to eat every day. Now, if you're like that, then I'm going to link all of these docs, all of the programs they offer, all of their nutritional information, and you can dive in and look at that if you want a little more specifics on, well, how much protein should I have? How many carbohydrates should I consume? What about fat? So I encourage you to dive in. Sometimes when you start reading on your own, another door opens to something else, and you just go into a whole new world that you didn't even know existed, right? So I encourage you to dive in, look at the show notes. I'll link everything for you. But I do want to go over 4 big things today. There's a lot of controversy on these topics, but it was interesting to hear because all of these docs have really gone into the research that's available on these topics. They're the expert, not me. I'm just sharing it with you, and you can dive deeper if you choose. But the four things I want to look at that can help you are, let's talk about fat. Let's talk about this element that seems to be either fat's horrible or eat a ton of fat and nothing else, right? The keto and all those diets. Then let's talk about dairy versus soy. There's so much controversy there, a lot of different information, but what does the research say? So I'll share that with you today. And then I want to look at the top foods that you should avoid. What should you not eat if you're looking to maintain your health or improve your overall health? Like, what are the biggest sources of chronic illness, disease, and death? And then lastly, I'm going to leave you with foods to include in your diet. You don't have to just cold turkey become a raw foodist tomorrow or just stop eating whatever you're eating cold turkey. You could simply start by just eating healthier foods and see what happens. You could start there. So my aim today is just to give you some tips that can help you with your own health journey. Before I dive into this, I want to share with you what I found most interesting about this cruise. Now, the boat we were on has 5,000 potential cruisers, right? I have no idea if it was full. It was a massive ship. It certainly seemed like there was a lot of people in the buffet line. What are cruises known for? Buffets, right? When we went into the buffet, we did have a plant-based section, which was really great because each meal we had was all plant-based. And it was the first time in 20 years I could go and eat something that I knew was all plant-based. I didn't even have to think about it. Because any of you out there who are vegetarian or you're looking to eat better, you know how difficult it is to walk into any restaurant in America. The food choices are slim for healthy foods. They really are. Everything is fried, doused in oil, or smothered in cheese. That's just the way it is in this country. So it was amazing to be able to eat some really great food. Some of it, not so good. I'm going to be honest. There were some dishes I was like, I don't even know what happened in the kitchen there. A couple things I noticed. One, I was astonished at how many people there were in this holistic plant-based cruise. I couldn't believe how many people participated. There was well over 1,000 people. And just by my own observation, I don't know hard numbers, but just looking around these lecture halls, which were huge, I would say that 75% of the participants were 70 years of age and older. Now, my mom is 75, and then everybody else was equally her age or much older. I mean, people look like they were well into their 80s, even 90, some of them. And I was amazed at how many people that age are taking their health seriously. And just by observation alone, I'm guessing, some of them are struggling with health. You could see they're deteriorating. And they're looking for alternatives. They're looking for better food choices and how they can treat themselves well and better their situation. So that was really amazing. And then the other thing I noticed when you're in a buffet, right? It's always amazing to kind of look at how much food people consume, right? Everybody takes advantage of the buffet. Oh, it's free. I got to get my money's worth. And you look around and the majority of the people in the buffet line, their plates are loaded with animal products, right? Eggs and bacon and sausage in the morning, and then hamburgers and chicken and, all animal products. The majority of the plate, very little of that plate has any greenery or fruit on it whatsoever. A lot of baked goods, right? Go get the donuts and the muffins. Yeah, it's good. I get it. It's very, very good. Not the healthiest, but hey, yeah, I've had my years where I'm loving donuts. When I was younger in my 20s, like my favorite thing to do was get up in the morning, have a huge caffeinated coffee and a scone. And then I wouldn't eat all day. But, live and learn. We all do these things. But what was most interesting to me is seeing that, the vast majority of the public eats animal products. It's just the way it is. In fact, I just looked up and did a search about how many people globally are omnivores, right? How many people? And it's like 90% of the population globally is an omnivore. And that's true, right? Most everybody eats animal products of some kind. So maybe only 9 to 10% of the global population are vegetarian, vegan, plant-based, whatever terms are floating around out there. But what's astonishing to me, and I've noticed this pushback a lot, you get on social media or even Netflix, right? And you see a lot of criticism about a plant-based diet or that plants can heal. There's even influencers on social media just trashing the plant-based diet, saying they're incredibly unhealthy. They're the most unhealthy diets on the planet. But what I find interesting is that the vast majority of the globe is consuming animal products, and the chronic illness rates are only increasing. They're getting worse and worse and worse. So I don't think that the chronic illness is correlated with the 10% of the population that's eating plants. It doesn't make any sense to me. And it seems that it's really maybe in the hands of the animal, dairy, big agriculture industry that is going to slam plant-based diets as a means of healing because they work. A lot of people get well when they take their health into their own hands. They really do. They heal themselves from all kinds of things. And for any of you that know the medical medium, he promotes healing through clean plant foods. That's it. He doesn't tout any particular diet, but he is saying that if you want to heal, then looking at the plant community is where you want to go for healing. But here's an interesting fact. You cannot patent a natural food. That means you can't patent an apple. You can't patent anything that grows in nature. That doesn't make the food industry any money, does it? But you can patent genetically modified foods. Anything that you modify in nature, you can patent, and then you have an industry. So I'm not going to go into that today, but you can think about that. I know you guys know GMO foods, and think about the greater implication of what's really going on there. I'll just leave that door open for you. But let's start off today by talking about fat. Years ago, late 70s and 80s, there was a huge push to eat a low-fat diet, right? Eat low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet. There's a cardiologist that I've read for years. His name is Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. I think he's in his 90s. But he was really touting a low-fat diet, low animal products, because he was seeing so many patients with clogged arteries, right? He was a surgeon. And he would put his patients on plant-based diets and low in fat, and he would see their cardiovascular disease go away. So this was a thing for many, many years. And then all of a sudden you get the Atkins diet came out, right? We got to push massive amounts of meat, and that's healthy now. It lowers all of your chronic illnesses. And yeah, like people do that diet and they lose weight, don't they? They lose weight, and some would argue because it's calorically deficient. You're not eating a lot of calories. And if you were eating all processed foods, right, and you just go to meat and vegetables, yeah, you're probably going to see some improvement. So keep that in mind. Anytime you're coming from your baseline of, I only eat the standard American diet, which is non-nutritive, and then you switch to something like vegetables and meat, yeah, you're going to lose weight. So there's been this shift, right? There's been a shift, and the whole industry is now saying that carbohydrates are bad. Everybody's like, bad, bad, bad. But these doctors that I listen to are really reinforcing that that's a total myth, that carbohydrates in their pure form, whole food form, right? Which means fruits, vegetables, whole grains, not refined grains, not breads, not crackers, not oats, oatmeal, whole grains like oat groats, brown rice, quinoa, barley, wheat berries, whole grains in their whole food form. That means you haven't processed them at all, are very good for you. They're high in fiber and they're good for you. There's no evidence that suggests in the research that they provided that those foods in their whole state are bad for you. However, when you strip them of all their nutrition and you make them into flours and powders and crackers and packages, yes, they have less nutritive value, right? You could argue that. So it's one thing to say that carbs are bad. Well, you could say, yes, refined carbohydrates are not good for you. But that does not mean that carbohydrates are not essential to your health. In fact, the brain is fueled by glucose. Glucose means sugar, it means carbohydrates. And it's amazing what marketing does, right? When you just say something over and over again, and most of us have no idea who's backing that research, who's promoting that slogan. We don't know. We just hear things. We repeat them. We don't even think about where they're coming from. It's easy to get lost in the jargon of it all. But a whole food, plant-based diet is consistent of fruits and vegetables as the main staple, with whole grains, which is full of fiber, right? Legumes, which is beans and lentils, nuts and seeds, very low fat and no animal products. So that's what a whole food plant-based diet is. That's what these docs are promoting. They're not promoting a diet high in refined carbohydrates or processed flours and grains. That's not what they're promoting at all. But let's talk more about fat. Dr. Neal Barnard has devoted a lot of his career to fat. He's written a book about diabetes or type 2 diabetes. He's got many recipes in it. I will link it in the show notes. But he argues that diabetes or type 2 diabetes is not about sugar. And that's what everybody is talking about, right? It's a sugar problem. Well, he says that's really not the case. The case is the fat is clogging the cell, and therefore the glucose cannot enter and leave the cell as it needs to. So fat is clogging up your cells. Now, I've mentioned this man in many of my health shows, Arnold Ehret from the late 1800s, who was a big believer that poor foods were clogging the system, right? And he was a big plant person, primarily fruit, but he was saying plant foods were by far the most nutritive for the system, but that all the other foods were clogging it up. And you could say, well, fat is clogging the system. At least this is the research that Dr. Neal Barnard has spent decades looking into. Not only that, but he works with his patients to eat a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet to help their type 2 diabetes, to lower the obesity levels for weight loss and get rid of their chronic illnesses. In fact, that's his main focus. The diet can help you feel better. It can get rid of your chronic illnesses. So anybody struggling with type 2 diabetes, even type 1, you could go look up Dr. Neal Barnard and read what he has to say about it. It's very interesting. And then another thing to look up also, and I will link this in the show notes too, but Brenda Davis did a whole study on the Marshall Islands. And the Marshall Islands, for those of you that don't know, I think they're somewhere between Hawaii and Australia. And they have the highest rate of type 2 diabetes anywhere in the world, which is interesting because they're an island. Most native people living in islands were always very healthy. In fact, the native people from the Marshall Islands were very, very healthy many decades ago. And they ate what was on the land, right? They ate their staple foods like coconut, breadfruit. They ate bananas. They ate whatever was natural to their environment. But then something happened after World War II. I think the United States came in and there was a lot of nuclear testing there. And I think it started damaging the environment. And then they became dependent on the U.S. supply of food, which, was a lot of canned and non-nutritive foods that were coming into the island. Well, then they saw a huge increase in obesity, in heart disease, and type 2 diabetes is running rampant through their community. So Brenda Davis went over there and did a study and worked with many, many people to put them on a plant-based diet, a whole food plant-based diet over a period of several weeks, and noticed how quickly their sugar levels dropped. Some of them got rid of the type 2 diabetes and they felt better overall and had a lot of weight loss. So it's not that complicated, she was saying. And they were not starved. These people were eating a lot of food every day, and they went in and also taught them how to prepare the foods for themselves. It wasn't just like, hey, we're going to prepare the food for you, and then we'll see what happens. It was like an education. This is what you need to do. This is how you prepare it. This is how you live a new lifestyle. And they saw tremendous improvement in their type 2 diabetes. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's just a simple fix, right? We're just getting rid of some junk, some processed animal products and refined carbohydrates, and just switching over to a plant-based model that's low in fat, and you see remarkable improvement. Now, Dr. Neal Barnard brought this up, and I thought this was interesting. A lot of people that eat meat, well, they say, well, I eat lean meats. So these are meats low in fat. And what he showed us was that, well, this isn't necessarily true, that even what so-called lean meats say, that these lean meats like beef, it's still 29% fat. That skinless chicken breast is still 23% fat. And that sea trout is 32% fat. And guess what? The big daddy, everybody thinks salmon is so amazing, right? So good for you. Everybody wants to go, well, I'm just not going to eat meat. I'll just eat some salmon. I used to eat a ton of salmon when I was younger, loved it. I even ate sashimi, sushi all the time. Well, salmon is 50% fat. This is kind of one of those foods where you go, oh, it's not as good as you think it is. In fact, he was saying, it's really not a health food. Yeah, you eat it from time to time, whatever, but he did not recommend you just eat salmon all the time. And I thought that was interesting because, again, Arnold Ehret, who I just mentioned from the 1800s, and he considered the number one worst food to eat in terms of meat was fish. He said because fish swim in their own waste. I thought, from a cleanliness point of view, yeah, maybe I don't want to eat something that's swimming around in its own fecal matter and urine. Whatever suits you, but it makes sense, right? So that's the fat content of meat. So let's say you're on a vegetable diet and you eat meat. The meat is still concentrated with fat, even if you're eating lean meats. Dr. Barnard suggested a maximum of 5 times a month. Now, for some people, that's going to be like, what? Right? I eat meat every day. Well, maybe you start out small and say, well, I'm going to eat meat twice a week. And then I'm going to eat meat once a week. And you just kind of work it down. You don't have to go cold turkey, but depending on where you are, right? If you're generally healthy, you could do a transitional diet and work yourself to less meat in the diet. And if you're somebody who's really ill, consult with your doctor, but it seems like eliminating those foods could be helpful for you. That's something you have to decide for yourself, but it's something to consider. So you can compare these fats that come in meat and look at things like the vegetables that have some percentage of fat in them, right? A lot of people think when you eat vegetables, oh, you're not eating any fat. Well, there is some fat. How do you think you get vegetable oil, right? Corn oil. I mean, think of these things. They all have a little bit of fat in them. So broccoli at the top of the list is 8% fat. Who knew? I did not know that. Beans, 4% fat. Rice, 1 to 5% fat. And sweet potatoes, 1% fat. So there's still a little bit of fat in your vegetables. So you could say, well, I am getting fat in my plant-based diet. And it's a very low amount, which is what they're promoting as a healthful diet. And what they see in their own patients. I mean, these are doctors who work with people every day and notice a significant improvement in health when people switch over to eating more plants and less animal food. Think about this for a minute. What do you think the number one most fatty food you could eat? Literally everywhere in America. You could get it anywhere. It'll be on every single dish you get practically, even if you're a vegetarian. Cheese. 70% fat is what cheese is. If you're a cheesehead, you love cheese. I was there. That was one of the hardest things I gave up years ago was cheese. I loved cheese. And you could see it in my body. It was clogging my system up. Now, some people maybe digest it a little better, but I certainly didn't, never did. So think about that in your own diet. If you love cheese, there is evidence that switching to plant-based cheeses does not have as a detrimental effect as animal cheese, but it's still not the best choice. But if you're transitioning and you really love cheese, maybe eat less cheese, don't consume it every day, or switch to a plant-based cheese you like. Maybe learn how to make cheeses. I've done that. There's really wonderful plant-based cheeses. Those are nut-based typically, and nuts are really high in fat too. So either way you look at this, cheese is high in fat. Doesn't matter. If you buy it at the store, it's got a lot of coconut oil in it, and I'll get into coconut oil here in a minute too. The big thing about fat is it's just clogging up your system. It's clogging your arteries. It clogs up the blood, and it's clogging up your cells. If you just look at people, it just looks like the system is clogged. I mean, you can see it. So, the fat that we're eating and consuming and almost all the foods we're eating today, you could say is clogging us at a cellular level. If you are looking to improve your health and to clean up your diet, consider eliminating the amount of oil, the amount of fat in your diet. You could switch to plant-based fats like avocados, nuts and seeds, coconut, the plant, not the oil, but coconut in general. The meat or shredded coconut or even coconut milk does have fat in it. But again, you would probably want to limit how much of it, if you're looking to lose weight or you're looking to better your health, you still want to keep that as low as you can. You're really wanting to up your fiber game, which is whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, and some legumes, and a little bit of nuts and seeds. And there are so many recipes today. Sky is the limit. I will link a bunch of it in the show notes. You could go to forksovernifes.com, and there is just recipe after recipe after recipe. If you're somebody who's looking to learn, you want to learn how to cook and prepare food for yourself, and this is new to you, there is just so much out there. I will also link Dr. Neal Barnard has a 21-day Kickstart program, and it's 21daykickstart.org. It is a free program. You can get on there and look at all the recipes for each day, and you can follow it to the T. You can adjust it however you want, but it is a way to get you started. It's a way to just kind of transition from a standard American diet into more plant-based foods. If plant-based is not your thing permanently, it is a way to start healing the body, to remove some of that excess waste and toxicity that's in the cells. And you'll find the more and more you switch over, the better you're going to feel. Now let's move into dairy versus soy milk. This is a big thing. What's interesting is the research that's out there, and Dr. Neal Barnard discussed this, is the big controversy in soy milk is they're claiming that soy milks like phytoestrogens is a problem. These phytoestrogens are causing breast cancer or giving males, you've heard of the soy boys, right? They say, oh, they're soy boys and they have man boobs. That's kind of the talking points that are out there. And Dr. Neal Barnard kind of cleared this up, which I thought was interesting, and I'll share it with you, was that, soy is the bad estrogen actor and it's going to cause cancer, when actually what they found in the research is that women consuming soy have less breast cancer rates, especially in Asian and Asian American women. They've done many studies also with women where they're increasing soy into the diet. Keep in mind, they're increasing like the whole food soybean. So like if you went to the store and bought some soybeans, not edamame, but the matured soybean, like the hard bean, and you soaked them and then you boiled them or slow cooked them overnight and then you ate them. You added them to a salad, or that's what they're talking about. They're talking about real soy. They're also talking about tofu and even soy milk if there's not a lot of additives and too much processing involved. They've done studies with a lot of menopausal women and they're giving them soy products and they're lowering the risk of cancer, and they're also lowering and having no hot flashes. So any of you women out there who are getting hot flashes, consider adding a little bit of soy to your diet, soybeans in the most whole food way that you can. In 2020, there was a study of over 52,000 North American women. It was called the Adventist Health Study. They found that dairy milk intake linked to 30 to 80% higher breast cancer risks, depending on the amount they consumed, right? And there was no link with soy products. So substituting soy milk for dairy reduced the risk by over 30%. These studies show the opposite of the talking points that are out there, like on social media and even in your paid influencers and things like that. And let's just be real for a second. The dairy industry is a $40 billion a year industry. The soy industry is like $5 billion. It doesn't even touch the dairy industry, not even close. So if we want to know how much dairy is being consumed out there, it's a lot more dairy and cow milk and cheese and all these things than soy products. It's just not even close. And the other thing that Dr. Barnard brought up was that in dairy, there is estradiol, which is a form of estrogen that's in dairy. That's actually, when you consume dairy, you're actually taking in estradiol, which is bioavailable, and it's linked to hormone-sensitive cancers like breast and prostate cancer. Estradiol is a known potent estrogen, where soys, phytoestrogens, and isoflavones, they are weaker and they're often protective. They're not as bioavailable as the estrogen that's in dairy. The research does not support some of the talking points that you hear out there that soy is terrible for you. So, for anybody listening, you want to include a little extra soy food into your diet. Maybe you're suffering from perimenopausal symptoms or menopausal symptoms, or you just want to lower your cancer risk, right? Because there's evidence that supports that. You could go and buy organic soybeans if you can, buy them in their whole dry state, soak them overnight. You could slow cook them or cook them all day long until they're soft. And you could eat them that way, or you could put them on a baking sheet in an oven of 350 degrees and bake them for about an hour until they're crunchy. And you could season them up and you could put them in a jar and keep them in your pantry. And when you make a big salad or you make a big bowl of food, you can just sprinkle a few soybeans on the top for a little crunch. If you guys like crunch in your salad, I'm one of them. I want crunchy in my salad. There's an option for you. And then it doesn't add the added fat like if you're adding a lot of nuts and seeds to your diet.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an Enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, moving on to foods that you want to avoid or things you want to avoid in your diet. Here are 5 things that you could just think about. They're simple, that you probably want to leave behind in your diet. And this is from Dr. Michael Greger. If you want to look him up, he has books called How Not to Die, How Not to Age. He has a recipe book, also plant-based recipe book. He's also got a new book coming out on ultra-processed foods, which he's showing that the research is not all the same there, that there are some benefits to some processed foods, but I'm not going to get into that now. You can look him up and look into that. But what does he say about foods you should leave behind? Well, this was a shocking statistic to me, but he put up a chart in the middle of one of his lectures that basically showed what the leading causes of death are globally. You know what the number one culprit for disease and death was? Salt. Increased salt intake is running rampant around the globe. Now, I've always read this, that salt is a poison. And it's very interesting to me that there's a salt shaker on every table in every restaurant across America and probably around the world. We're addicted to salt. We don't know it, but salt is in everything. I read a book several years ago. I've mentioned it in the past. It's called Man's Higher Consciousness. It was written by Hilton Hatima. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but you can look it up. In that book, it says that salt is a poison. It makes you wonder why the hell it's in everything, right? And his statistic that he showed is supporting that salt is increasing the death rate globally. Here's something I did not know. I know they put salt in everything. I know it's in every canned food, every prepackaged food. Anything you look at where the sodium level on it is always high, right? It's very difficult to buy anything processed that doesn't have a high sodium level. Like I like to buy canned beans or canned tomatoes, and I'm always looking for the no salt. In fact, I will take no salt over organic any day of the week. But that's just me. But salt's a thing. And for years and years, right, you hear salt causes high blood pressure, causes cardiovascular risk and disease. Well, I think they're probably right. What I did not know is that the meat industry, the producers of meat, of processed meat, which is every packaged meat you see in every grocery store in America, they have been injecting chickens and other meat with salt water since the 1970s. Wow. They have these injectable machines. They just inject the meat with salt. Do you know why? Because it makes it taste better. You know? So we eat meat. People love meat. I used to eat meat my whole life. I grew up on meat. You know, it tastes good, but there's a lot of salt in it. And then what do people do with the meat when they get it? Like, let's say a turkey, you brine a turkey for Thanksgiving, right? And you add all these seasonings and you add what? Salt, more salt, more salt to the meat. People get their plates of meat delivered at a restaurant. What's the first thing many people do? Add salt and pepper, right? Without even tasting it. So the salt intake is a real issue, and it's contributing to a lot of disease around the world. If you're looking to improve your health, consider eliminating salt, but you may not be able to do it right away because the food's going to taste like crap, right? If you're used to salting it, it's going to taste different. So wean off of it if it's hard for you, if the food is just tastes horrible. One thing I have done over the years is I don't cook with salt. So any dish I make, I do not include salt in the dish. But if it needs salt, I will salt the top of it with a very little bit of salt so that when it goes into your mouth, you actually taste the salt. Because many of you know, right? When you cook with salt, you just cook it in and it loses the saltiness. So then you're still salting the top of it. So maybe try, don't cook with the salt and just add it at the end. Another thing that's helpful is using lemon. Squeezing lemon on your food also gives it some extra flavor. Consider adding spices and herbs and other things that are really flavorful and weaning off the salt because it is a thing. And it's interesting when you stop consuming so much salt, when you go back and eat something salty, it's really hard to eat it and it almost tastes horrible. So salt, number one, leave behind the salt. What's the second thing? I mentioned this earlier, but they said fish. You want to avoid fish because it's 50% fat. It's also loaded with mercury, right? We know that the heavy metal content in fish is causing a lot of problems in people's brains. It's getting stuck up in the brain, not only with the fat, right? And a lot of people suffer from mercury poisoning or dementia. There were some studies that Dr. Greger showed us that showed when dementia and Alzheimer's patients eliminate fish from their diet, they actually noticed noticeable improvement in their symptoms. Something to think about, something to look further into, especially if you yourself or your loved ones are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's. I was just looking this statistic up because Alzheimer's is on the rise and it's gone up 145% since the 1990s. And most of us know somebody who's suffering with dementia or Alzheimer's in our family. It's a very debilitating disease. It's really hard on the family. Dr. Greger suggested and showed pictures of the brain blood vessels of Alzheimer's patients in the lecture. And he showed us a picture of a healthy blood vessel, which is basically just picture like a pipe, a clean pipe. And then picture the pipe with a bunch of grease inside of it. And so that the blood flow is now blocked and you have a very tiny hole in that blood vessel. So what's happening is the brain is now deprived of proper blood oxygen levels, right? Makes sense. And this is all due to a high fatty diet. There is no known cure for Alzheimer's right now. In fact, they were showing that even the medications that they prescribe their patients don't even work. So why not start with diet, right? Why not do some research on your own and look into it and give it a shot? So number one, avoid salt. Number two, avoid fish. Number three, I already said this, but cheese. Avoid cheese because of its high fat content. And number four, meat. Not surprising. Here's a couple other things about meat to consider is 85% of the meat that you find in the grocery store contains fecal matter. I hope you're not eating a chicken sandwich while you're listening to me because I'm going to gross you out and I'm sorry. But most of the meat in the grocery store contains fecal matter. It contains possible E. coli, salmonella in chicken. It contains meat-borne pathogenic illnesses, right? Toxoplasma in beef, tapeworms in pigs, mad cow disease. We've all heard this in beef. There are so many potential pathogens going on in meat. That in and of itself is a reason to eliminate it or eat less of it. And the other thing is it's high in fat and it's high in protein content, which animal protein is also linked to higher rates of disease and cancer and heart disease. Meat is also laced with human medicine and antibiotics. Even the organic meats, which say they don't have antibiotics and all these things in their cows, They do samples of people that eat meat, and their urine samples do contain antibiotics, so they're peeing out antibiotics. And keep in mind, organic meat does not mean that you're stopping cancer risk. Just like the China study by T. Colin Campbell, I'll link it in the show notes, you can read it. That study was solely about animal versus plant protein consumption. And higher risks of animal protein were associated with higher rates of cancer and chronic illness. And it wasn't the case with plant proteins. So if you're somebody who's looking for protein and you want to include protein in your diet, then maybe consider adding more plant proteins to your diet. Then you're lowering your risk for chronic illness and disease. So we've got salt, fish, cheese, and meat are things to leave behind as much as you possibly can. And the last one that I want to leave you with is coconut oil and palm oil. These are some of the worst oils that you can eat. Now, there's a huge debate over coconut oil. A lot of people in the raw food community consume a lot of coconut oil. The evidence and the research that was presented to us does not support that. In fact, it supports that high usage of coconut oil and palm oil is terrible for you. Now, you could just look at coconut oil. And what happens to coconut oil when it's cold, right? It hardens like a lot. And so I kind of think of that as, does it harden in the body? I mean, the body's temperature is 98.6, around that. I mean, I don't know. But the research is showing it's an oil to avoid. If you want to consume oils, you move into olive oils. You can find raw, unfiltered olive oils online. They are a little expensive, but they're better for you. And then think about where these oils are coming from, because if you're consuming these oils like olive oil, flax oil, avocado oil, the oils are increasing your risk of disease and fat in the blood and in your cells. So maybe consider eating the food instead. If you like them, like eat some avocado, a handful of nuts a day, and that's it. Not 5 handfuls, not 10 cups, but just a handful. Or a little shredded coconut from time to time. Or maybe you have a little bit of coconut milk in a soup, just a little bit for the taste, but you're not overdoing it. So leaving behind salt, fish, cheese, meat, and coconut and palm oils is a good idea. And also, you peanut butter lovers out there, right? What do they do with peanut butter? You look at the peanut butter, you pick it up and the ingredients, and let's just for a second break it down, right? Peanuts are fatty. They got a lot of protein, but the peanut butter itself is already a fat. And then they go and add what? Palm oil. They cream it up, add some sugar, and make that stuff even better. And then you get addicted to it. So if you can buy nut butters with just the nut that don't have any added oils or added sugars or additives or anything like that, or a little tip, you got a food processor, you take some almonds or peanuts or whatever nut that you love and make your own nut butter. You can put a couple cups into a food processor, whatever nut you like, and just hit start. Grind them up for a while and then scrape down the sides, stop it, keep it going for a while, scrape down the sides, and just keep that going for about 5 minutes until you get a full nut butter on your own. It's much cheaper, it's better for you, and it's just a natural food. Again, limiting how much you eat, but you can make your own. It's really easy, and you know where it came from. One other thing before I move on to what you should eat, something you should think about to not consume is SOS, and that would be sugar, oil, and salt. If you can eliminate those 3 things out of your diet, you will notice a remarkable change in your health. Just look at the labels, look at the ingredients, and if it says it's gluten-free, it's vegan, it's plant-based, and then you look in the ingredients and the top ingredients are sugar, salt, and oil, avoid it. Remember, marketing sells. People sometimes forget to look at the ingredients, but if you look at the ingredients, who cares what the marketing says? Who cares how pretty the box is? Look at the ingredients. And if the number one thing is sugar, avoid it. It's definitely processed sugar. It's not a natural sugar. And then oils, right? Look at how many foods on the shelf will have oil. Practically all of them. Speaking from experience, after I had my twin daughters in 2009, I was already plant-based when I had them. after I delivered them, I'd lost most of my weight, but I was just struggling with these last few pounds. And I had not come across anything about oil until this time. And I started eating plant-based in 2006. So about 2009, I still hadn't come across the oil thing. I was still adding a lot of oils to my diet, thinking, omega-3s, I had to add flax oil and all these oils to my salads and even coconut oil. So I had a diet high in oil. Well, I came across this Forks Over Knives documentary back then, and it was all about processed oils are terrible, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, well, maybe I'll just try eliminating oil out of my diet. And any dressings I want to make, I'm going to add just a handful of nuts or maybe a little tahini or something that's food-based to cream it up. Because I like creamy dressing. And you know what? The weight just fell off of me. I wasn't even exercising like crazy. I wasn't doing any of that. But just eliminating the oil, and I suddenly just shed the pounds from my pregnancy. So any of you out there that feel like you're struggling, you can't seem to lose the extra pounds, start with the SOS model. Like, where am I eating a lot of refined sugar, oil, and salt, and see what happens for yourself. And you're your own best experiment, right? All right, last, let's get to the foods that you can consume or maybe you should include in your diet for more vitality. And this isn't about going on a diet. This isn't about even changing the diet that you're currently on. Dr. Neal Barnard went into, these are just foods to consume in your life that can, over time, contribute to weight loss just by adding them. So if you're somebody who's like, oh, I can't change my diet. I just don't want to. I really like how I eat, but maybe I could just add better foods into my diet. Then think about the top 6 foods that he listed. And the first one was blueberries. And it was more than just blueberries, but it was all berries. And it was foods that are purple or dark blue in color. This would include grapes, right? Red cabbage even, anything dark, plums, things that are dark. But berries in particular, and I've read plenty of information on the darkest grapes that you can find for healing. So add a cup of blueberries in the morning to your diet. Put it on some oatmeal, do whatever you want, but add them to your diet, eat them plain, but that could be beneficial. Number 2 was adding cruciferous veggies. Cruciferous veggies are broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts. These are your cruciferous veggies. Steaming them is best, keeps the nutritional value higher, but you could put them in the oven and bake them or roast them if you like that. But adding those to your diet, adding a small portion of broccoli to your dinner, or chopping up some cauliflower and putting them in a soup. There's so many things you can do with these foods. You can also make smoothies and add a ton of kale. Add varieties of kale, not just like one. Get a bunch of different kale and add them to your smoothies in the morning if you don't have time or you don't know what to do with kale, right? And let's be honest, it doesn't really taste great unless you know how to prepare it. But a great way to disguise it is throw it in a smoothie with some berries, maybe a banana or a little bit of fruit and a little bit of coconut water, and it'll be amazing. You barely even taste it. So blueberries, purple foods, cruciferous veggies. Number 3, green leafies. Green leafies, the darker the better, but all green leafy veggies, they're really good for you. They have a lot of phytochemicals in them, but they're also highly alkaline. This is not something that was discussed last week, but they are alkaline. They're highly alkaline and can alkalize your diet and really helps the body heal. So adding them to your diet, adding spinach to your diet, making a spinach salad, maybe some romaine or some mixed greens. You can buy them pre-made, right? You don't have to wash them yourself anymore. You can go buy them already done. You can also add a plethora of different greens, like I said, to a smoothie if you have difficulty getting this into your diet. If you like to juice, you could juice a ton of greens. You could do all kinds of green leafies, spinach, romaine, kale, dandelion greens. You can do the tops of beets, the tops of carrots. There's greens all over. Go to the green section of the grocery store and just start picking out different greens, and you can just juice them. And then you can add, a little bit of green apple or even red apple if you want. You can add lots of lemon and ginger and celery and cucumber and just load that baby up. And it's amazing just if you drink that in the morning or, once a week even, just adding more green leafies to your life, you'll notice a difference in your health. Number 4, melons. Watermelon, cantaloupe, all kinds of melon. Adding these to your diet, you'll also notice a difference. Number 5, citrus fruits. Oh, I love citrus fruits. One of my favorite things to do right now is make a big smoothie and add spinach, celery, or cucumber, and I peel a lemon and a lime and a grapefruit. And I cut it up, toss it in the Vitamix. I add some ginger to that, maybe like a frozen banana, or I like to keep grapes frozen in my freezer, and I might add a handful in there. And then I add all that greenery, maybe even some herbs if you like parsley or cilantro, even a little coconut water, it just depends, or plain water, a little bit of ice, and just pulverize that up. You have yourself a glass of antioxidants, minerals, vitamins, phytochemicals, all the things that are so good for you that you could just start your day with. The other thing, if you find that you don't have time, you're one of these people like, I don't have time to make a smoothie. How about making it at night? Like at nighttime, before you go to bed, like you got to get up early and you got a meeting or you got to go to work, make it at night, put it in a jar. And when you get up and you got to leave or you got to get on your call, you drink that first thing or you drink it afterwards and it's already ready for you. With just a little bit of planning, it's amazing how you can include healthy foods in your diet. And then the last thing that Dr. Barnard recommended to include or consume in your diet is legumes or even tofu, adding that into your diet. Legumes would be like all kinds of beans, right? There's so many beans out there, and eating them in their whole state. You can buy canned beans if you want, or you can make them yourself. Soak the beans if you can, right? Soak them overnight. You can slow cook them. You can keep them in your fridge and add them to a salad or make a big grain bowl, add some beans. Garbanzo beans fit into this. Lentils, all kinds of lentils. You can make soups. Adding those into your diet can also be really beneficial. So what is it about these foods? What is it about blueberries, cruciferous veggies, green leafies, melons, citrus, and legumes? How do you say that? I don't know. You hear legumes or legumes, whatever, beans. But what is it that's happening? The research suggests that it's taming your appetite. So you're not like as hungry because you're satisfied. Your body's utilizing these nutrients. You're also increasing your metabolism by eating these foods. So if you consume these foods regularly, and it doesn't mean you have to eat all of them every day, but let's say you can get at least one of them in daily, then over time, this can contribute, what they've noticed, is to just weight loss, even if you haven't changed the rest of your diet. So that's cool, just including some really good foods in your diet. And then something they did not mention, but it's something that I think about, and that is all of these foods, every single one of these foods, probably even the bean family to some extent, is they are high in water content. They all have water in them. And water in hydrating foods helps to saturate the cell so that it can start detoxing the gunk, right? So it can get the fat out of there, get whatever your pipes are clogged with out, and start cleaning the body. So just by including these foods into your diet, see what happens. And then I will link all of these things in the show notes for you so you can dive in and look into all the possibilities that are out there for your health. Because if any of you out there are suffering with health trouble and you don't know where to turn, it's so empowering to know that there's a lot of doctors out there that do promote a plant-based diet for health. And there's a wonderful website that I will also link that Dr. Scott Stoll has created. It's called plantritionproject.org. Now, if you get on there, there's all kinds of information, education, conferences, resources, and even providers. So these are people who promote a plant-based diet. You can look it up in your area and see if there's anyone around you that already helps people with this type of food and in their health. And maybe they can help you in your own journey. So I hope all of this information has helped you as we navigate this chaotic world. It's wonderful to know that there's doctors who have lived this lifestyle. Not only do they teach it, but they've lived it for decades. And they're wonderful resources for you in your own health journey. So I love sharing this information. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to me. You can email me at info@livelikeeden.com. You can direct message me on Instagram at live.like.eden on Instagram. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions or possibly point you in the right direction. Make sure to look at all the links in the show notes, and I will see you all next week. That's it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. If it resonated, please share, follow, and drop a review with your takeaways. It really means a lot. Visit my website at livelikeeden.com to subscribe for weekly reminders and blogs, or sign up for a free 30-minute consult to explore one-on-one guidance sessions if you're really struggling in Awakening's darkness. Take my Awakening quiz to get a personal podcast playlist that meets you exactly where you're at. See you next week for another deep dive.